Hi, I'm Simon. Thanks for joining us for this session. I'll be presenting Nickel in the context of the Java SDK, and my colleagues Jeff and Todd will be presenting the .NET and Node SDKs respectively. I'm going to start with a little primer on Nickel, but I'm sure all of you have seen the keynote this morning, so this should be news to you. But we have a NoSQL database, and we said, why not add a query language to it? We've been querying on relational data for a while with SQL. And so now we have added Nickel to query on JSON data. So here's a Nickel query. It looks pretty much like SQL. We select some fields from a tutorial bucket. So it's pretty much like SQL, but we can do some things more advanced, like dig into a sub-part of the document, an array in the JSON document in this case, and do some predicates on the content of the array, for instance. So in Couchbase Server 4.0, we get a new service, which is the CBQ engine for Nickel queries. It runs on port 8093. And we also get a command line client. Since we are dealing with JSON here, responses from the Nickel service are also JSON. So we get some JSON results, but we also get some metadata in JSON, like how long did the query take to execute, to be parsed, how many results do we have, so we can explore these metrics in the metadata. OK, that was the intro, and I'm going to talk about the usage in the SDKs right now. So we have various languages, SDK. But today, I'm going to concentrate on the Java SDK, the .NET SDK, and the Node.js SDK, which share pretty much the same API. So the API is at the bucket level, like in key values operations. And we deal with statements, so Nickel statements, select star from a bucket. We run it inside a query, which may have additional parameters. Also, statements can have placeholders, like positional placeholders, sort of like when you did the SQL to avoid injection of via parameters. You can do placeholders like that, or you can have named placeholders. And you give the values through the query by passing in a JSON array or a JSON object that contains the values. You can also prepare statements. So that means you get an execution plan from the service. You can hold to it. It's represented as a query plan in the SDKs. You hold to it. You can put it in cache or something. And then you can reuse it as many times as you'd like. And you skip the phase where it passes the query and it prepares the plan, and so get a little extra performance doing that. You may, at least. So that's the idea for the API in the 3 SDKs. And then now we will present more in detail and do some demos and live coding in each of the SDKs. So I'm going to give the floor to my colleague Todd, who will do a quick swap of laptops and do a demo in Node. Yeah.
OK. So first thing, within Node, we've put a new class in just to deal specifically with Nickel queries, which is referred to as Nickel query. And this comes off of the Couchbase bucket object currently. And now we have basically 3 types of queries that are available natively within the SDK, which are the nickel query, the view query, and the geospatial query. But today, we're just talking about specifically the query API for nickel. So the very first thing you do, if you're using this in any Node application, is you instantiate your Couchbase variable. You bring up a specific cluster and connect to that. And then you get your bucket object. And from there, you actually have your Couchbase nickel query instance. And from that point, then, you can build a function that looks something like this. We'll go through kind of what each of this means, and I'll show just a really quick demo for how it runs under the covers. First thing is your standard node function callback signature here, where I've got a callback as my second parameter, and my first parameter is basically this SQL statement that I'm going to run. When I actually build the string that I'm going to use, because I'm not using a prepared statement in this instance, I'm basically going to go through and parse this, if you want to think of it that way, of the actual string that I'm bringing in and saying, I'm going to use that for my particular nickel, my SQL statement. And the thing that's interesting to note here is we actually support defining your own consistency. There's 3 values for this, which we have request plus, which binds the consistency for the results that you're going to get and the index at the request level. We have the same thing. It's also called statement plus, so on the individual statement level, and then not bounded, which is the default. So if you don't pass anything here, whatever state that the index is in prior to returning results to you is what you'll get the information back as. And when we actually go ahead and run this, we basically standard, again, callback here is what we provide. So when you pass a function back in, you're going to basically check to see if there's an error. If there's not, just return the results back. And if we look at what this looks like from a demo perspective, if you watched our travel application this morning, the way that works under the covers, it's a Node.js app. And if I just log in here, create a new user, sign in, and in this particular example, this is a Angular type ahead that's bound to a nickel statement under the covers. And so if I type in LHR, I basically get Heathrow, and you'll see the actual query that it ran under the covers. So nothing fancy there. One thing to note that is when you do run queries specific to things that are either reserved characters or have things that you need to do escape sequences with, use the backtick. I know when I was starting to play with nickel, that was something that took me a little bit of time to get used to. I wasn't always thinking in that term. And basically, all this whole application does under the covers is just run nickel queries. So if I do to LAX, for example, pick a travel date of this, say we'll come back the next day, return. And if we look at what it does under the covers is, again, it just runs multiple queries, passes those back to Angular. Angular gets it back as a JSON object in first level and knows how to parse it from there. And with that, we will switch back over to Simon.
Jeff. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Java SDK now. Oh. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Java SDK specifically now. So as you remember, I was talking about statements. So we actually have a statement class in the Java SDK. We also have the query plan class. So you start from the statement. You add optionally some query parameters, like you want some pretty JSON or stuff like that. That's parameters for the engine. And maybe if you have placeholders, you add a JSON array or a JSON object for placeholder values, and that gives you a query. So all these are classes in the SDK. To create a query, we have factory methods. So from the query interface, we have a factory method for a simple query, no parameters, no nothing. Parameterized query, so placeholders, basically. Or maybe you want to execute a query plan that you had from a previous run. And that gives you a query result. So what can you get from the result from this class? Basically, you get did it went well, so pass success. If it fails, if it returns false, means that there is a syntax error. It fails fast, basically. And final success is another method that you can check. If this one returns true, it means you have all the rows, everything went fine, and the query executed neatly. Then you have access to the rows with all rows, which gives you a list of rows, basically. Or if something went wrong by checking the previous two methods, you can dig deeper and access the actual errors returned by CBQ engine. These are JSON objects, by the way. Or you can access the metrics with the info method. And then you have a bunch of other metadata, like request ID is generated by the server. You can pass in, at request time, a client context ID, which will get back to you by the server and can allow you to associate logically a few queries, for example. And you get a signature that describes the structure of the results. And you can also get an async version of that. So in the Java SDK, we use RxJava for everything asynchronous. So this would give you observables instead of lists or of booleans. Or every result is an observable stream. But there's something more in the Java SDK. There is the DSL. The DSL allows you to build select statements with code. And basically, you get type safety, and you get guidance from auto-completion and stuff like that. So it won't allow you to do a select where you have to specify a from clause. The DSL gives you that. You import. You begin by statically importing the select method and all the methods in the expression, all the static methods in expression class. And to do this statement, so select star from bucket where token greater than 100, you can use this code. Looks pretty much the same, right? So we use the select method, give it the clause. Then we see that we can only chain a from clause. And from there, we can only do, well, we can do at least a where clause. This is legit. And for the where clause, we will generate an expression, so using the X static method. This is a token, and it allows you to get access to all the operators, like greater than 100. And here we see that we use the I method, which allows you to escape a token, because, for example, the beer sample has a dash in the middle of it, and the dash needs to be escaped for Nickel to understand it. So this is the way to do it. I'm going to do a quick demo now. So I'm going to fire IntelliJ and switch to the OK. So I will start. I have an abstract class that connects to. Oh, Mm-hmm. You guys are not seeing this, right? Can you mirror the display, Jeff? Do you know? Windows. Okay. This is okay. I won't be able to do live coding if it's not mirrored. So I just switch to the master branch, and I will just talk through the code. Yeah. So what I have here is the code to connect to the cluster, and I have also prepared some helper methods. So if we want to issue a query, can you see that all right? Yeah. If we want to issue a query, then to run a query, we start from the bucket, and we pass in the statement to the query method. And this just gives you a query result object. If we want to deal with the result and print it out to the console, basically you have to check that the result is final success, true. And you can get the collection of rows from the result object and print out the size of this list. And if you want details, then you can iterate through the result itself and extract the value, the JSON value. Extract the JSON value from each row, which will print every single result in the sample. So let's run it to see if everything is fine. I hope you can see the console. Let's run a simple. Let's run a simple statement. So here I've prepared a little query. Select name as beer from beer sample, basically, only limiting to the 10 first items. I just get rid of that. Yeah. And I just run the query, and this gives me so remember this method at the bottom executes the query and prints out to the console. So here you go. You see 10 beers. Actually, no, you see 9 beers and a brewery, because we didn't do any where clause in this query. So let's try to use the DSL and limit to the actual beers, right? So I have another demo with a predicate. So here you go. I'm using the DSL here. So to build my statement, I start with a select method. I'm selecting the name as previously from beer sample, but this time I want only documents in the beer sample bucket that match the type beer, because we mix breweries and beers in the beer sample bucket. Once again, I ordered them the result by name and limit to 10. Let's run that. Here you go. So this time we only have beers. So great. We were able to do that using the DSL. I wanted also to show you a join. Do the demo for a join. So okay, so here what I did is try to get all the beers by brewery. and get the beer name, the brewery name, and the website for the brewery. And here's what I did. So I did a select using the DSL. I'm selecting the 3 items that interest me the most. And I'm selecting from the beer sample for everything about beers. And I'm doing a join, a self-join on the beer sample again. I do a little alias as brewery here. And the join is made on keys. So basically what I say is for each item in the beers namespace, if it has a brewery ID, then that's my foreign key, basically. So I attach it to the document key in the beer sample bucket, and that does a join. And I've actually restricted using nickel functions, string functions, substring. I've actually restricted that to the brewery, which name begins with flying. Let's see if it passes with flying colors. OK, executing. That's a dump of the request itself. And it found 33 beers and breweries. And here you go. Flying Fish Brewing Company, Flying Dog Brewery, Flying Bison Brewing. Those are, yeah, correct breweries that match our criteria. And these are the beers in this. So yeah, I've managed to do a self-join with a criteria on the name of the brewery and get all the beers produced by these breweries. And that's it for me. Yeah, Jeff?
Thanks, Simon. Appreciate that. Hi, guys. My name is Jeff Morris. I am the .NET. I manage the .NET SDK, Couchbase .NET SDK. I'll talk a little bit about the support we have for Nickel in the .NET SDK, and some of the upcoming support we have for a Linq Provider that will be based off the SDK itself. When we talk about the .NET SDK and support we offer for Nickel, we're looking at 2 different levels of support. One is SDK support itself, so it's right down to the driver level. And second of all, it's support for extensions like a Linq extension or Linq Provider, which will be an extension of that SDK. At some point in time, they may be combined, but at the moment, that's how we've kind of architected things. But we'll see how it works out, and we may change that. If you're going to use so first of all, we'll talk a little bit about the .NET SDK support itself, the core driver support. So when we're using the driver, you'll see there's a lot of symmetry between the Java side and the .NET side. In the Java side, when you're going to build a query, you use what's called a query request object. That's the API that is in the SDK that supports the Nickel REST API. And what it does is it allows you to do ad hoc queries on a bucket. iBucket is the interface that the SDK provides for Couchbase bucket support and Memcache bucket support. Memcache support is not, sorry, let me get it straight. Nickel will not be supported on Memcache, but it will be on persistent buckets, Couchbase buckets. Importantly, it offers support for all Nickel features. So basically, because it's an ad hoc query and because it takes a string statement, really anything you could stuff into that string, you could execute against the server. So it's very full-featured. It's also a wrapper around the REST API that's exposed by the query service itself. And with that, you get additional things like type safety, IntelliSense support, a Fluent interface for chaining that has method chaining, for adding parameters, etc. It also has a data mapper that takes your JSON objects and either converts them to a dynamic type or to a POCO, a plain old CLR object. Now, the second level of support we're offering is the Linq Provider, which is in development at the moment, early development. And anyone out here know what a Linq Provider is? There you go, we got some. Okay, so language integrated query. It's basically a type-safe it's support for a link for basically queries on Microsoft languages or .NET languages like C#, BBNet. I heard someone talk about BBNet. And it basically has a syntax that's very SQL-like. And what you'll see is that Nickel adapts really well to a Linq Provider because it has a very SQL-like syntax. The Linq Provider is it's based off Relink. If you're familiar with Relink, it's the same open source API that the Entity Framework is based on, and so is in Hibernate, the ORM. Importantly, what it does is it extends the .NET SDK. So it extends the SDK, the core driver, but it doesn't make modifications to it. It's an open source project, and we've had a couple of great contributions. If you're interested and you want to get involved with it, it's early on. Please contribute. We really appreciate that, and it makes a better product, I think, when you get the community driving the features that it's going to support. What it does differently than the core SDK support, the core driver support, is it really gives you a subset of the Nickel language. As time goes on, we're going to add more and more features, but up front, it's just it has support for basic features like select, where clause, distinct. Join is coming very soon. I tried to get that into this, and I didn't quite get join, but join will be there soon. Of course, that will change. Another differentiator from the core support that's in the .NET SDK is you cannot use the dynamic keyword. So Linq does not support projections using the dynamic keyword. Linq requires that you have statically typed objects that are compile time. So what you need to do is take your domain model, so your POCOs, and they need to map to your JSON structure that you're storing in Couchbase. If you're going to do this, I suggest you use some kind of code generator to do it. Basically, do your modeling in Couchbase, do your modeling on the JSON documents themselves, and then generate the code to get your domain model from there. Further along, it's likely we'll add support for generating a domain model from your JSON itself through an extension of the Linq Provider. So really quick, I'm going to go through do a demo here. And you guys see that? There you go. Give me 1 second. And Unfortunately, I can't see. Give me 1 second here. Okay. So this is going to show, in this demo right here, I'm going to show you the support that we have, the driver level support. So what I have is a console application. At the top, what I'm going to do, first of all, line 17, is I'm going to initialize the cluster. So the cluster helper is basically a helper class, static helper class that allows you to create a singleton instance of a cluster. It also allows you to open multiple buckets under that singleton. So it's a singleton object and a multi-tin for buckets. I'm opening the default bucket here, which I'm actually going to change that to travel sample. Get the ticks in there. And travel sample. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a query off the command line, and then I'm going to execute it. Line 30, it's going to call a method called simpleSelect. And what this method is going to do, it's going to create a query request object and pass the statement in. That's the nickel statement that you're going to execute. It's then going to asynchronously query the database and return back the results. If it's successful, we're going to iterate through the results and display each row. If not, I'll display an error on the console. Give it just a second. Okay, so let's type in a quick statement here. Looks like I had a problem bootstrapping. Give me 1 second. Set to default. And start new instance. If this doesn't run, what I'll do is go through and just step through the code and show you what it would do. All right, you know what? I'm going to step through the code and just show you what it would do, and I'll go over some of the Linq support. There it goes. And if you can see this. So I typed in a very simple query. select all from travel sample. I'm just going to show one, limit one, and you get back the results. If I change this to 10, and you'll turn back 10 results. So what that's doing is I'm creating the NQL query right here. NQL query is going to get executed by that method. Results are going to be output to the console application. Now, going a little further, to show you a glimpse of what the Linq Provider will look like. Okay, so in this example right here, we have same thing. We're going to initialize the cluster and call a method. Now on lines 27 through 31, we're going to build a Linq query. And if any of you use Linq Entity Framework or Linq to SQL, you'll see that it's very similar, if not identical, to the syntax that you would use when querying a SQL Server or any other database. Only difference is the bucket itself is the database. Route would be your POCO, be your static class, and what you would do is you would add a where clause to this. Where r.top is equal to route. And once you've done this, now when you execute this, it's going to map your route document to your route POCO or domain object. I can actually run this right now, but that's an example of what you're going to expect with the Linq Provider as we go towards a beta release or developer preview. And that's it for me. Do we have any questions? Not yet, but it will be in the following week. Within a week or two, you should see a beta. So you should see a developer preview of the SDK that works with the Linq Provider and Couchbase 4.0, and more importantly, the multidimensional support we have in Couchbase 4.0. What was the question? So the question was, the gentleman asked, he's mentioned that he had tried a earlier version of the SDK and the Linq Provider with an earlier version of Couchbase and the NQL DP4. In NQL DP4, the query engine itself was a standalone service. In Couchbase Server 4.0 beta, that's now integrated with the server, so you no longer have to start that service. And the two aren't compatible. If you run it on your own machine, it may work though. So if you run it on localhost, I think it would work, assuming you had the query service enabled. Okay, great. So the question was, the question is, will NQL be able to run with Couchbase Lite? And are we planning to support that? It's a great question. I think Matt's here is going to jump in and maybe give a...
Pardon me? Yeah, just to jump in on that. So that's definitely something that we're looking at going forward. It's not something that we have specifically on the roadmap right now. The one thing that I would say is that we're looking with Couchbase Lite at is really taking things that are idiomatic to whatever that language is. So for example, if you're writing in Xamarin, you would use Linq, right? And if you're writing in iOS, you would use something like NS predicate as a way to query there locally. and then see exactly how that comes together. So we definitely want to get some feedback on what it is you think you'd like to do with Couchbase Lite, Sync Gateway, and I'd love to talk to you some more to get some more context on that. Thanks. Jeff, you want to say thanks? He ran away.
Okay.
Jeff, Simon, Todd.
So real quick, hey, thank you very much. And Simon and Todd, they've walked away, but thank you very much. Hope you appreciate it. Here's Simon right here. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. If you need to have any questions, forums, grab me, grab Simon. We're glad to answer them. Thank you.